What's up, gunfighters? Today, by God's grace, hopefully, what you'll consider a good meat and potatoes episode of this podcast. Although some of people's favorite ones are the cartridge talks or the top polymer handguns or pocket pistols as far as ratings go, I consider these kind of episodes far more important. The ones not so much on having the better piece of gear, but on being the better gunfighter. And the gear is a part of that. But being a warrior is much more than gear. That's what we're going to talk about today. Now I'm going to put this out to the patrons first and early and commercial free. But at some point you guys will get this, I think. And I'll probably go back and put the intro and the bio in this one so you understand the things that God's blessed me to do, the bona fides to actually talk about this stuff. Today we're going to talk about mastering the handgun. Seeking greatness with the handgun. Not just being competent, not to the level of, your average CCW guy, your average patrol police officer. Not to take anything away from those guys, but to be a master of the craft. Be a master handgunner. To go beyond the basics. I would say beyond the fundamentals, but there's a book out by Brian Enos, it's been out a long time. Highly recommend it, called Beyond the Fundamentals. And that would be a good title for this, but I don't want to take that because that's kind of, I think, one of the quintessential books in learning to be a master of this craft. So I'm not going to call this episode that, but going beyond competent to mastery. We are going to talk about, hopefully if you're listening to this, you have a grasp of the fundamentals, a firm grasp of things like stance, grip, sight alignment, sight picture, trigger control, breath control, follow through. Those are the fundamentals. I am a firm believer in the majority of your practice, your training should be on precision. For a couple of reasons I will state. The old adage, you can't miss fast enough to win. And there's some debate. I couldn't really find any substantial sources about whether Wyatt Earp did or didn't say this or something like this. Fast is fine, but accuracy is final. Some of the translations say another truism is that it's almost always better to ensure a hit the first time than miss and make up the shot. And I'm no stranger to speed. A lot of my competition wins are in speed challenge, which if you don't know is like drag racing with a handgun. It's about speed. But you also have to be fairly precise. Some of those targets are 40 yards away. I also really like the man-on-man steel matches, like where it's mano a mano, one man against another. One man gets kicked out, one man progresses. I really like those kind of matches. Speed is a big part of that. But you can only go as fast as you can hit the target. So I do a majority of my practice on the precision, the vast majority. Here's another thing that I found to be true. If you can't shoot good slow, you probably can't shoot good fast. In fact, you probably go way downhill. So if you think, I can, hit a silhouette target at 7 yards with my handgun, and that's further than the average distance of a handgun encounter, then I'm good. Okay, is that target moving? Are you moving? Have you been shot? Are there people screaming? Have you just been running? Things like that, right? If you can't shoot precise with most of the things in your favor, no time limit, a flat range, good lighting, things like that. If you can't be precise like that, what do you think happens to your accuracy when you've been shot, when you've been running, when the target is moving, when you're moving, when you've got a bunch of other things on your mind, when people are screaming at you, when teammates are screaming at you, when your buddy's been wounded, right? if you can't shoot good to start with, if you can't shoot well to start with, when you start stacking that stuff on there, please tell me how you expect to shoot really good and precise then. So that's a big reason I do a lot of the handgun practice that I do on precision, on accuracy first, because you might think it's irrelevant to be able to consistently make headshots at 50 yards. I would say I don't think that it is. And two, all those fundamentals are the same, right? It's not like I have to make a wind call at 50 yards. It's not like I have to have a different grip or different stance or anything like that. But that's the backbone, right? If I can shoot a very small group at 50 yards standing offhand, and offhand doesn't mean with my left hand or my weak hand, it means standing unsupported with whatever gun, my go-to training gun, my go-to carry gun, then if you start adding things like I've been running and I'm leaning around cover, right? And you cut that accuracy in half. Okay, that's still a decent headshot at 25 yards. If you have a hard time making a headshot at 7 yards consistently and you add those things, then where are you? Maybe a headshot at a few feet away, and that's it, right? The more mastery you have of the fundamentals, and they will degrade when you add all these things, right? But the more precise you are to start with, the tighter that group is to start with, the more allowable degradation you have while still being combat effective. If one man can normally get all his hits in a silhouette target at 25 yards, I'm talking a full silhouette, and the other one at 50, under, let's say, static conditions, you might think, well, that's good enough. It's kind of silly to train beyond the 25-yard thing. I mean, most cops only qualify at 25 yards. I mean, the FBI qual only goes to 25 yards. Again, how many adversities can you stack on that before that guy no longer can? Again, that person is winded. That target, instead of being a full-on silhouette, they're facing sideways. So maybe now they're half the target size. You get the idea there. That's why I submit precision and accuracy is an important thing to practice. Even though I will totally concede that the majority of the time, whether it's competition or actual real-world defensive scenarios, those conditions are not ideal. But if you start with a crap foundation, if you suck to start with, and you add all these other factors, losing blood, being winded, it being 3 a.m. and you're super tired, whatever it is, whatever those adversities are, those hardships are, right? That's not going to help you. So I'm going to give you some things to go beyond the basics on this handgun mastery. Natural point of aim. Now you can have a solid stance, you can have a solid grip, and your natural point of aim is way off, right? You should know this. And I wouldn't give this to a beginner, right? And it's not because I don't think it's like some secret thing that I can't tell them, right? When I have students, I give them, it's not like I hold stuff back. When I was the commander of a tactical team, a big part of that was training my guys. And it's not like I had some secrets that I wasn't telling them, and that was why I was the best shooter on the team, right? I wasn't hoarding these secrets. That's not how I work. But if they're struggling with basic stance and grip, I'm not going to give them natural point of aim. I'm just going to overload them. If you have a good, firm understanding of stance and grip and how grip works on a handgun to control it well and minimize movement of the handgun and things like that, and you understand the basics and have a firm grasp of stance, you might want to look at natural point of aim. And this is often thought of in the rifle context, and I actually started competition shooting, cutting my teeth on precision rifle, and it's a big part of that. But it also can be a part of handgun shooting. If you're sighted in on the target and you close your eyes, after a couple of seconds you open your eyes. Hopefully your stance and grip stuff are firm enough that it's not just all over the place. But if you do that a couple times and you're consistently pointing to the left, or you're consistently pointing down, or your front sight is risen considerably up, or the optic, or whatever, then you know your natural point of aim is jacked, right? You got to fix that. If you have an even more firm grasp of the fundamentals and you have a consistent stance and grip and draw, right? You can post up on a target and draw out on it with your eyes closed. And you should be able to open your eyes and your sights are on target. Or that's what I'm talking about, good natural point of aim. If you do that and you have it consistent and you do that and you're consistently one thing or another. If you're not consistently one thing or another and you're all over the place, then I would say you need to work more on your fundamental grip and stance. But if you're consistently, let's say, presenting high, you're consistently presenting high, then you know you got to fix that in your natural point of aim. And you have to have a good understanding of those base elements on how to do that. You got to work on something in your grip. You got to work on something in your stance, which may include like your diaphragm. It may include something like relaxing your shoulders. You have to kind of understand those basic things to be able to adjust to this. You don't want to adjust in a way that's not natural. That would kind of defeat the purpose of natural point of aim. But getting that good natural point of aim with a handgun. Here's some reasons why. If you're talking about shooting well and consistently, consistency is a big part. Not just like you can make a 50-yard handgun shot, but can you do it consistently? Because I give a guy a box of ammo, probably a basic shooter could hit it once. I'm talking consistently. Consistency is a big part of that. Natural point of aim is important for consistency because if you're using muscle or skeletal tension to torque and stay on target, one, you're going to get tired faster. And when you start getting tired, you're going to start favoring whatever the natural point of aim is. And if it's not on that target, if it's to the right or to the left or high, that's where your shots are going to go. So it's really important for consistency. It's also really important for shooting fast because you want that gun to return naturally to the natural point of aim, which should be on the target. If you shoot and the gun always ends up somewhere else and you have to muscle it back, one, you're going to get tired. Two, that's wasting time. You want that gun to return to its natural point of aim, which should be on the target. If you have no idea where that is and every time you shoot and your gun comes down to the right of the target and you have to muscle it over to the left, you're wasting time. So it's worse off on the accuracy, the consistency, and the speed. So natural point of aim is something I'm going to tell you to work on if you've got a firm grasp of the fundamentals. If you don't, if like you're working on the fundamentals, the safety, I'd say great, right? Nobody popped out of their mom's womb shooting El Prezes. Work on that. But if you're to the level, start working on that natural point of aim. And on that, I touched on something that I want to get into that's beyond a regular fundamental. Self-diagnostic ability. Self-diagnostic ability is really, really important. That's one thing if you like hire me as a shooting coach, a shooting instructor. I've got a ton of experience in, by God's grace, doing that. Military, civilian, law enforcement. I can look at a lot of people and say, you're doing this wrong. In fact, that's something I do often for the patrons. They'll send me videos of them either shooting matches or dry firing, and I can critique them because God has blessed me to be a professional shooting instructor and teach a lot of people. Unless it's some weird thing I've never seen before, and it's usually not. I can usually look and critique what somebody is doing. Why they're doing this, why they're doing that. The most common one is, their shots are going low left, right? I almost certainly know why they're doing that. They're consistently shooting low left, right? That's a classic quintessential thing. Assuming they're a right-handed shooter. Right? It's not a mystery. But self-diagnostic ability, being able to do that to yourself. Being able to diagnose what you're doing wrong. And it's a constant battle, right? It's a perishable skill. Sometimes I can shoot my standard and it feels like effortless, right? It feels like that target is huge and close. And even though it's the same distance time after time, sometimes I really struggle with making my standard. And I have to diagnose myself. oh, my grip is bad. My natural point of aim is off. I'm not applying enough thumb tension. My head is torqued some kind of weird way, so my follow through sucks, because as soon as the gun goes off, I want to move my head because it's uncomfortable. Therefore, I pull the shot off. Those kinds of things. Self-diagnostic ability. That also means knowing when you do well. When you're like, that, praise God, that was a blessed shot. That was a really good shot. And you remember that. And you even tell yourself, remember that. Self-diagnostic ability is really important. There's nothing wrong with missing. We all miss. I miss. If you don't miss, then I would submit you're not challenging yourself. You're not pushing yourself. Especially in practice, right? You should be pushing yourself. But when you miss, do you know why? If you missed and you don't know why, then that kind of is a waste. But if you miss and you know why, and you have that self-diagnostic ability, and you correct it, then you learned. And that's a win. You know, doing your target transitions. Did you overshoot the target? Did you undershoot the target? Is that because your finger wasn't prepped on the trigger fast enough, or was it because you're literally going faster than you can actually engage those targets, doing target transitions, and being able to diagnose between the two? Because if I'm doing target transitions and I miss, I shoot, let's say I'm going left to right on targets, and I shoot to the right of the second target. I have to kind of be able to diagnose, am I doing that because I'm moving my body too fast, or because I didn't get back on that trigger fast enough? So there was a lag time between my sight being on the target and me being able to actually make that gun go off. I kind of have to diagnose that, right? And that self-diagnostic ability plays into all kinds of scenarios. These are things, and I think some of these, it's been a while since I've read Brian Eno's Beyond the Fundamentals, but to give credit where credit is due, let's just assume he talked about these things this way in the book. You should read that book if you haven't, especially the first couple of chapters. They're not even about like cool gun stuff or whatever. They're about like mental things. And the mental game is a huge, huge part of shooting well. Most of it is mental. I'll give you an example. A lot of people think a flinch, that classic low left, right? They're anticipating, they're flinching, whatever you want to call it. They're shooting their handgun low left. And a lot of instructors will try and rectify that. They'll try and put a Band-Aid on it. They'll say, oh, you got to shove this way with your hand. You got to grip the gun this way, and that'll fix your flinch. No, it won't. It'll put a Band-Aid on your flinch. It'll put duct tape on the radiator. And then when you start revving the engine, that duct tape is going to explode off of there. I disagree with that philosophy of, oh, if you're shooting low left, just grip it harder. Yeah, at short distances, and if you are concentrating on that thing, that can stop you or mitigate the shooting low left for a time. But you're putting duct tape on a radiator. You should be able to shoot one-handed. You should be able to shoot with the gun upside down and not shoot low left. Because the flinch does not start in the hand. It doesn't start in the grip. It doesn't start in the trigger finger. It doesn't even start in the shoulders. It starts in one's mind. It starts in your mind. The flinch starts in your mind. You must fix it there. Before the flinch ever manifests itself on the target or in your hands, it starts as a seed in your mind. You must fix the flinch in your mind before you have any hope of rectifying it on the target, because that's where it starts. You go to the source. Don't put a Band-Aid on it. Don't put duct tape on it. Fix the problem. Actually fix the problem in the system. The mental part of shooting is vastly important. Some crucial things. Focus. Awareness. Alertness. And these sometimes are diametrically opposed, right? I want to be alert and aware. But the human eye and the human brain can only truly focus on one thing at a time. You can multitask, but your focus can only be on one thing. I want you to, if you're looking around a room, if you're driving, if you're on the treadmill at the gym, on a ruck march, whatever you're doing and listening to this, pick out something, anything at any distance, and focus hard on it. You'll notice that everything else is blurry. If you shift to another thing, the thing you were just looking at is blurry. That's how the human eye works. That's how your brain works. You have to focus intently and intensely on one thing. knowing what to focus on, when to focus on it. And that will kind of chip away at other things. You can be aware of other things going on, but when you're intently focused on that one thing, that other stuff becomes kind of background stuff. It becomes secondary, and it should, if you want to be able to shoot really well. That intense focus. And a lot of people, again, they put it in the wrong place. They put the focus on the eye, the human eye. But the focus starts in the brain. You have to tell, your brain has to know what to focus on and when to focus on it and when to shift focus. Classic example, going to target transitions again. One of the biggest things I see with shooters that's holding them back is they're trying to focus on that front sight or that optic and maintain their focus on the sights on the gun that entire time. So they shoot a target on the left and they watch that gun and track it all the way to the next target. And they're focused on that gun the whole time, and then they break that shot. That's incredibly slow and inefficient. And dangerous in a tactical scenario because other things might be happening. Once you've shot and called that shot and you know that's a good shot, you snap your eyes to the next target. Trust me, the gun will follow. What your brain is focused on, the gun will follow. When the gun gets back on that target, then you refocus on that front sight. That is incredibly faster than trying to maintain focus on that sight or that optic and track it all the way across the battlefield or all the way across a competition stage, right? It's a waste of time. But a big part of that is, what are you focused on and what are you aware of? You're so focused on that dot or that front sight, you're hard focused on it, which sometimes is good, that you're not aware of the other things and you have to find the other target while looking at the front sight, and it's just slow and inefficient. Focus, awareness, being alert. And being aware plays a lot into self-diagnostic ability. Right? And I will often do this exercise when I'm teaching a shooter. In dry fire. Dry fire is more important than live fire. I stand by that. I've said that many times and I stand by it. And we'll be doing the slow fire precision exercise, which again I think should be the bulk of your practice. And I will say, okay, which way did the sight move? And they'll say, oh, it didn't move. And I say, well, then you probably weren't paying attention. You probably weren't alert enough. You probably weren't aware enough. Because even me, I practice this all the time. Unless it's that really, really, really good shot, either the sight moved or I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't alert enough and I didn't see which way it moved. Maybe it was a hit, maybe it was a miss, who knows? Maybe the sight moved up, down, left, right, who knows, right? That's not how to be a good shooter. The human body is not a machine, right? We move, we breathe, sights move. And you can mitigate that. But in general, when you pull the trigger, something's going to move through that firing cycle. If you have follow-through, again, going back, you have to have a decent fundamental follow-through. Assuming you have that, and that might be the issue, what did the sight do? And why did it do that? And how do we mitigate that? The sight moved up. Okay, how are your shoulders? I can usually look at a shooter and tell if their shoulders are too tense. That's a big reason why a lot of times people shoot high. Not the only reason, but that's one of the first things, again, self-diagnostic ability. If I am shooting high, if I'm missing that day shooting high, like, how are my shoulders? Too much shoulder tension. Okay. You have to be aware. I have to be aware of where the shot's going. I have to be able to call my shots. That self-diagnostic ability, but that awareness. I can't diagnose what I'm not aware of. You have to be aware. That focus, that awareness, that alertness. Those are things that are so much more important in being a good shooter than the little minutia that we like to focus on as far as tactical kit, which can be important, right? But the mental part of shooting is the foundation. Listen to this, gunfighter. One should not have to see the target. One should not have to see the impact to know where one's shot went. That's one of those things of mastery. One should not have to shoot a plate rack and then have to go back and look and see which targets one missed on the plate rack. You should know, right? You should know while you're shooting those plates if you missed one. right? What's faster on a plate rack? Shooting the entire plate rack, re-looking around, seeing which one you missed and going and re-engaging that one, or shooting, 2 plates and then you call your shot, you missed the third and you immediately go back to hit that third plate and continue. Before you even hear the shot, before it even registers in your brain of hearing the shot, you saw, because light is faster than sound. When you get into going really fast with a gun, a lot of times you can get that, you can touch that. Where before that sound even reaches you of it hitting the plate or missing a plate, you missed that plate and you redo the shot. Again, one should not have to see one's target to know where one hit the target. Being able to call one's shot is an important skill, and that plays into focus and awareness. If you weren't focused on the sight, then how are you going to know where you're going to hit it? You just think you might. And if you're not aware of the other things, like what happened to the sight during the firing cycle, then you won't be able to diagnose that. And there will be a range, right? You're not always perfect. Like if your sight's moved within this area of the target, then I might not know exactly where, right? If I'm shooting a bullseye target, exactly where. But if I know that my sight, whether it's a optical sight on a handgun or an iron sight on a handgun, I tracked my sight and I know that it didn't go beyond the 8 ring. It went from the center X to the 8 ring high right on that shot. Then that round, assuming my gun is zeroed, right? And there's no weird anomaly or something, but that's generally not the case. I know that my round went somewhere between the X and that 8 ring high right. I know that. Because just the laws of physics, there's nowhere else that it could go. If my sight stayed in there until after the shot left the barrel, then that's the only place that shot could go. Again, barring some weird kind of ammunition or gun-related anomaly like the sight got broken or something. Right? Then that's where that shot went. You don't have to see it. I don't have to bring the target back to know. And that's a struggle even for a master, but that's part of it. Being able to call that shot. And again, dry fire is important for that. If you can't do that dry fire, you're probably not doing it live fire. Just a lot more distractions on live fire. I don't have to shoot a bullet to know where that bullet would have went. Again, barring some weird anomaly. Right? If I know my gun is zeroed for that distance, even if I know I'm zeroed at 50, but my gun is a half an inch high at 25, I can still know that, right? If I'm dry firing, I'm stuck at a 25-yard indoor range, right? I can know in dry fire where that shot went. I don't have to shoot an actual round. Now, some things it is important to shoot actual live ammunition with. But assuming my gun's zeroed, my gun's good, and I know it likes that ammo, I don't have to shoot a bullet at that target to know where that bullet is going to go. Right? I can call that shot. You should be able to call that shot. That's a great thing. And the better you get at that, the less ammunition you'll have to actually shoot versus live fire. One of the core fundamentals that I think is so important that you always need to be mindful of it and be on it. Trigger control. Trigger control is so much of the mechanical part of shooting. Now again, a big chunk of shooting is mental. But if you talk about the mechanical, the physical part of that, manipulating that trigger is a giant part of that. That trigger control, super, super important. And I'm going to go back to what I said. If you can't shoot good slow, you probably can't shoot good fast. If you can't manipulate a trigger smoothly without moving the gun slowly with no pressure and just taking your time, then you probably can't do it really fast. And if you want to be fast and accurate, wring out every drop of wasted time. Part of shooting really fast is not moving really, really fast. It's being efficient and ironing out all the superfluous garbage in your draw stroke and your transitions. Iron all that out first, and only at the very, very end, if you absolutely have to, do you wring out that trigger press. A really good smooth trigger press. Trigger control. That is such a huge part of the physical of shooting the handgun well. It's something that's so easy to do, right? Me telling you how to do that is super simple, but simple doesn't mean easy. Just like it's simple for me to tell you how to run a marathon. You probably know how to run. We'll just keep doing that for 26.2 miles. Easy to explain. Trigger control is like that. It's super easy for me to tell you, put your front sight with proper sight alignment on the target, and then pull the trigger without moving that sight, or with, a handgun red dot. Put the dot on the target and pull the trigger without moving the dot. It's simple to explain. It takes a lifetime of practice and continued stick-to-itiveness to stay on top of that. That is a mark of a master. Not to worry about the next cool whiz-bang thing, the next new whiz-bang toy. Which, come on, I like guns. I like that kind of stuff. I enjoy that stuff. A lot of stuff we talk about on Gunfighter Life is that, because that's what you guys like to hear about. Those are the episodes that generally do the best. But that's for your average gun person. If you want to be a master, you have to have the discipline, the self-discipline and the endurance to do the minutia ad nausea. That quote, I don't think Einstein actually said it. It's often misattributed to him, I think. He might have said it. I never met Einstein. I didn't hear him talk. So who really knows? But the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, part of the key of shooting is consistency. I'll flip that around. Part of being a great shooter is doing the same thing over and over and expecting the same results. You have to be able to do the same thing over and over. Again, consistency, not just a good trigger press, but trigger press after trigger press after trigger press, day after day, year after year. Anybody can pull a trigger. Almost anybody ages 5 and up, right, can pull a trigger. It's just reality. One of the things I love to teach is not the cool backflip tactical handgun shooting classes, which by God's grace I certainly can teach, but it's youth. It's youth. Youth handgun, youth rifle. Any kid 5 and up can pull most triggers on a handgun. It's not physically hard, but it takes a master to be able to have a good, consistent trigger press over and over. And when you start adding those other things, right, when you add explosions, when you add gunfire, when bullets are coming at you, and your adrenaline is jacked through the roof, then through all those hours of discipline and endurance and tedium ad nausea of good trigger presses, can you do that same thing in those conditions? That's a master. I'm not the podcaster that's going to pee on you and tell you that it's raining, right? A lot of that stuff is tedious. But you know what's really, really fun? Hitting your target. You know what's really, really rewarding? Hitting your target. Being a master of your craft is a great blessing. And all that you have is a blessing. Your endurance, your stick-to-itiveness, your tenacity, your peace of mind, your focus, your awareness, your alertness, your time. Those are all gifts from God. Best use them properly. To he who has, more shall be given, and he will have an abundance. But he who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. Now, this is the second podcast I've recorded today, and I did one on Alpha Male, and the same thing came up, and it wasn't planned. It wasn't planned. So I'm going to put in the parable of the talents, because if you're not familiar, the parable that Jesus says, men are given different measures of talent. The ones who use them are blessed with more, and the ones who don't use them, it's taken away. Consider that. So I guess that will be the tactical verse of the day for this episode as well. For your tactical tip, do this. Do it. Dry fire today. Focus on pulling the trigger without moving that sight. Something that sounds so infinitely simple. And it is simple, but powerful for being a master at a handgun. use that talent. This is one of the things that I recently heard, and I'd like to give credit. I don't remember the name, but one of the instructors at the 6 Hour Academy, or one of the older instructors, and I had never heard it put this way. And I don't know that he came up with it, but I didn't come up with it. But when I heard it, I was like, oh, that's so good. Talking about the mental game. Picture that you're trying to pull with your trigger finger that front sight or that dot straight back through the rear sight. Visualize that. Think about that when you're trying to achieve that great trigger press. But actually do it. With that, I'm going to put in the tactical verse of the day, the parable of the talents. Now, for the tactical verse of the day, I'd be humbled and honored to read for you the parable of the talents. For it is just like a man about to go on a journey, who called his own slaves and entrusted his possessions to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, each according to his own ability. And he went on his journey. The one who had received 5 talents immediately went and did business with them, and earned 5 more talents. In the same way, the one who had received 2 talents earned 2 more. But he who received the 1 talent went away and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. Now after a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. The one who had received 5 talents came up and brought 5 more talents, saying, Master, you entrusted 5 talents to me. See, I have earned 5 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful slave. You were faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter the joy of your master. Also the one who had received 2 talents came to him and said, Master, you entrusted 2 talents to me. See, I have earned 2 more talents. His master said, Well done, good and faithful slave. You were faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter the joy of your master. Now the one who had received 1 talent also came up and said, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you did not scatter seed. And I was afraid. So I went and hid your talent in the ground. See, you still have what is yours. But his master answered and said to him, You worthless, lazy slave. Did you know that I reap where I did not sow, and gather where I did not scatter seed? Then you ought to have put my money in the bank, and on my arrival I would have received my money back with interest. Therefore, take the talent away from him, and give it to the one who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has, more shall be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who does not have, even what he does have will be taken away. And throw the worthless slave into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. That's a reading of the words of Jesus Christ. Those are red letters. Use the talents you've been given, men. With that, thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.